Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and Miras Hashem today we will be learning Daf Samach Amud Aleph. We pick up today on Daf Nun Tes Amud Beis, 3 lines off the bottom in the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Reish Ayin Tes Sif Hey. Our learning today should be a schus for Achenu Kabeis Yisrael, Hanusunim Bar Tzara Ubashivya, Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha, Hamakim Yirakim Aleihem V'Yetziam Yitzar L'Rvacha Me'afela La'oira Mishiba L'Geula, Hashta Bagolo V'Zman Kariv and Amar Amein. Our learning should be a schus for Fu Shalema, for Tzvi ben Leah Miriam, and for Daniel ben Naomi. And our learning should be a schus for Yisrael ben Rachel, Yonasan ben Michal, Yoel ben Michal. The Rebbe Shalom should watch over them, together with all of our brothers and sisters who find themselves in harm's way, b'chol makom shehem. So, we're here in Siman Reish Ayin Tes, and we have been discussing the halachas of a basis l'davar ha'asur. Now, this is not really the main place where we discuss the halachas of basis. Over here it comes into play because over the last several weeks we've been discussing the halachas that pertain to hadlakas neris and to a ner on Shabbos, to a burning ner of any kind on Shabbos. Right away, that's going to bring up the topic of a basis l'davar ha'asur, because whenever you have a ner, the lamp or the candlestick, is going to be a basis l'davar ha'asur. It's the base, it's the support for the flame. The flame is a dvar muktzah, the flame is a davar asur. Anything that's underneath it that is supporting it is bottled to it. It's a basis l'davar ha'asur, and it itself becomes asur. Now, over here in Sif Hey, we have an interesting halacha. It's not a tremendous chiddush to us, or it shouldn't be, because it flows directly from everything that we've learned until now. Says the Shulchan Aruch Sif Hey, ner shehedlikai b'Shabbos. Now, first I'm going to translate this literally, because translating the Shulchan Aruch literally, the halacha that we're going to get is true. We're going to see a chiddush in the Mishnah Berurah that besides the literal meaning of the words of the Mechaber, there's even a larger chiddush over here. But let's first start out by just translating literally. Ner shedliku b'Shabbos. If you have a ner that you did not light before Shabbos, you didn't light it by Ben Hashmashos, you didn't light it before Ben Hashmashos, you lit it on Shabbos. Now, why would you be lighting a ner on Shabbos? So says the Mechaber, ner shedliku b'Shabbos, a ner that you lit on Shabbos, l'chaya, for an expectant woman who went into labor and she's delivering a baby, u'l'chayla, or to an ill person who's a chayla sheyesh by sakana, a chayla who's in danger. So we learned that you're allowed to light a ner for such a chayla because it's pikuach nefesh. V'yolda hachaya, and then mazel tov, the woman gave birth. V'nisrape achayla, also Baruch Hashem, the ill person, his health improved, and he's no longer a chayla sheyesh by sakana. Now, says the Mechaber, if the ner goes out, mutter l'taltaloi im kava. Now, if the ner goes out, you're allowed to move the ner. Okay, this really is not hard to understand. In our case over here in Sif Hey, in again, the literal meaning of the words of the Mechaber, the ner was not lit before Shabbos. So the candlestick or the lamp was not a basis l'davar ha'asur by Ben Hashmashos. By Ben Hashmashos, this was an unlit ner. You lit the ner on Shabbos. Okay. When you light the ner, the candlestick or the lamp becomes a basis l'davar ha'asur because it has a flame on top of it. So as long as the flame is on top of it, it is a basis l'davar ha'asur, and it itself is muktzah, and you're not allowed to move it. But when the flame goes out, it's no longer a basis. If it was lit before Shabbos, then it was a basis by Ben Hashmashos. If it's a basis by Ben Hashmashos, then we say migoy de iskatzoy leBen Hashmashos, since it was muktzah at the time of Ben Hashmashos, because at that point in time it was a basis, iskatzoy lekula yuma. It remains muktzah for the entire Shabbos. But in our case over here, it was not a basis during Ben Hashmashos. It wasn't lit during Ben Hashmashos. It was only lit on Shabbos itself. So while it's lit, yes, the candlestick is a basis, so it's asur. But once it goes out, it's no longer usher. Why should it be usher? It's no longer a buses. There's no longer a flame on top. Migui dis katsoy? No. You only say migui dis katsoy leben hashmoshes is katsoy lekuliyuma. The only time you say that if something was muktzah for a part of Shabbos, it remains muktzah for the rest of Shabbos, that's only true by something that was muktzah by ben hashmoshes when Shabbos came in. Then we say, if it was muktzah then, it's muktzah for the entirety of Shabbos. But if something was not muktzah by ben hashmoshes, it became muktzah 10 o'clock at night, Friday night, or it became muktzah 11 o'clock in the morning, Shabbos morning. In that case, the muktzah is only a temporary situation. It's only a temporary condition. While the flame is there, it's muktzah. Once the flame is gone, it's no longer muktzah. Now let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. It says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in tesvav. Mutter. And the Mishnah Berurah spells out exactly what I just explained to you. De'ein muktzah lachatzi Shabbos. Because something that's muktzah for a part of Shabbos. That's what it means, muktzah lachatzi Shabbos. Literally, the words mean something that's muktzah for half of Shabbos. What it means is, ein muktzah. We don't make something permanently muktzah for the entirety of Shabbos, lachatzi Shabbos, if it was only muktzah for a part of Shabbos. The dafka im iskatzoi ben hashmoshes, shehu betchilas knisas haShabbos. It's only when something is muktzah by ben hashmoshes, when Shabbos comes in. That's the only time. Hu d'amrinan de iskatzoi lekulei Shabbos. That's when we say that it remains muktzah for the entirety of Shabbos, ach la'achar shekava, even after the lamp goes out. Avaloi bazeh, but not in our case. And now we're going to see the big chiddush that the Mishnah Berurah says, where the Mishnah Berurah is going to learn the mechaber not very literally. And if you look at the Bir Halacha, you'll see where he's taking, not the Bir Halacha, in the Shar Tzirnais Cut Yud Gimel, he's taking this from a Prima Gadim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Avaloi bazeh shehudlak me'erev Shabbos l'chaya v'chayla sheyesh by sakana sheheyamuter b'tchilas haShabbos l'taltaloi. The Mishnah Berurah is extending the case of the mechaber. Literally translating the mechaber is talking about a case where the ner was not lit before Shabbos. So it wasn't lit by ben hashmoshes. It was lit later on. It was lit Friday night. It was lit Shabbos morning. Now the Mishnah Berurah is telling me the mechaber's halacha is true even if you lit the ner for the woman who was delivering a baby or for the chayla sheyesh by sakana before Shabbos. So it was lit by ben hashmoshes when Shabbos came in. We're still not going to say migui dis katsoy ben hashmoshes is katsoy kulayuma. You know why? Because if you lit a ner before Shabbos for the sake of a woman who was delivering a baby, or for the sake of a chayla sheyesh by sakana, then when Shabbos came in at ben hashmoshes, the ner wasn't muktzah. If you have a chayla sheyesh by sakana on Shabbos, and you need to move the ner for the tzarich of the chayla sheyesh by sakana, you're allowed to. It's not muktzah. So that means, even if you lit a ner on Erev Shabbos for the sake of a chayla sheyesh by sakana, when Shabbos came in by ben hashmoshes, the ner is not muktzah. You're allowed to move it. And therefore, you're not going to say migui dis katzoy ben hashmoshes is katzoy kulayuma, because it's not is katzoy ben hashmoshes. By ben hashmoshes, it wasn't muktzah. So lo is katzoy kulay Shabbos la'achar shenisrapi achayla ela alazman chu doilik belvad. In both of these cases, the ner is only going to be muktzah while there's a ner burning on top. That you can't get out of. As long as there's a ner burning on top of the candlestick is going to be muktzah as a basis l'davar ha'aser. We'll explain that again in a minute. But now the Mishnah Berurah says, v'cholshkein, certainly, if you translate the mechaber literally, v'cholshkein im hudlak b'Shabbos gufa, if the ner was lit on Shabbos, so that there was no burning flame when Shabbos came in by ben hashmoshes, l'tzarech chaya v'chayla, it wasn't lit by ben hashmoshes at all, then certainly the ner was not iskat soile kula yuma. It's not going to be muktzah for the rest of Shabbos. And therefore, Eis Katan Tezayin, Mutal Ataltalayim Kava. So then when the ner goes out, you're allowed to move it. Now, the Mishnah Berurah cautions us. From a simple reading of the Mechaber, it sounds like if you lit this ner on Shabbos for the sake of a chayla sheyesh by sakana, so, okay, even if the chayla gets better, right? So the chayla gets better, it sounds like, and then the ner goes out, now you're allowed to move it. So, okay, you know what that sounds like? That sounds like I could move it for whatever reason I want. So let's say, chas v'chalila, there was a chayla sheyesh by sakana. 10 o'clock Friday night, he needs a ner. I took a silver candlestick, I took a ner, I put in a candle, I went ahead and I lit it. I'm allowed to do it, pekuach nefesh. Then the chayla got better. Okay, if the candle is still burning, I'm not allowed to move the candlestick. It's a basas l'davar aser. But now that the candle goes out, it sounds, from a simple reading of the Mechaber, like I could pick up the silver candlestick and I could put it away to protect it so it shouldn't get stolen. Now, in that case, why are you moving it? You're moving it for its own purposes. You're moving it to benefit the silver candlestick. Says the Mishnah Berurah, that's not true. You wouldn't be allowed to move it for that reason. Says the Mishnah Berurah, when we say that you're allowed to move it, you're only allowed to move it litzarech gufay if you want to do something that's mutter with the candlestick. What you're going to do with it, I don't know. Or you want to move it because it's sitting on the night table and it's in the way. You need to put down a bowl of chicken soup for the chayla. So the candlestick is in the way. So you want to move it litzarech mekaymai. That's when you're allowed to move it. But you're not allowed to move it to put it away to protect it from ganovim. Why? Because forget bosses, it's still muktzah as a klisha malachta le'isr. And a klisha malachta le'isr you're not allowed to move unless you're moving it l'tzarech gufay or tzarech mekaymai. So again, just to recap what it is that we're saying over here, we've learned the halacha. If you light a ner on Erev Shabbos, right? You light a ner on Erev Shabbos. Excuse me, I'm sorry. You light a ner on Erev Shabbos. You're not allowed to move that ner on Shabbos even after the ner goes out. Now, l'chayr is a kasha. Why can't you move it after the ner goes out? While the ner is burning, the candlestick is a basis. I understand you're not allowed to move it. But once the ner goes out, there's no muktzah flame on top anymore. Why can't you move it? The answer is, because since this ner was burning when Shabbos came in, so by Ben Hashmoshes it was muktzah as a basis, and we apply the rule, migri dis katzay Ben Hashmoshes is katzay kula yuma. Says the Mechaber here in Sif Hey, but realize, what if it was not a basis by Ben Hashmoshes? What if you lit the ner on Shabbos itself, 10 o'clock Friday night, so it wasn't burning by Ben Hashmoshes? Then you don't have migri dis katzay kula, migri dis katzay Ben Hashmoshes is katzay kula yuma. When would you ever have such a case? When would you have a case that you lit a ner on Shabbos? Oh, you lit it for the purposes of a chayla sheyesh by sakana. So now you lit a ner 10 o'clock Friday night. As long as the ner is burning, the candlestick is a basis. It's muktzah as a basis. But once the ner goes out, it's no longer a basis. You're not going to say migri dis katzai because it wasn't muktzah by Ben Hashmoshes. So there's no migri dis katzai le Ben Hashmoshes. It's katzai le kule yuma. Now, the Mechaber just extends this, second line from the bottom, and he says, the same halacha would apply. V'hu adin lamadlik b'Shabbos b'shoigig v'kava. Same thing would apply. Forget a chayla sheyesh by sakana. Forget a yeledes, a woman who's giving birth. Somebody b'shoigig lit a candle on Shabbos. He woke up from his nap, and he was very confused, and he forgot that it was Shabbos, and he went ahead and he lit an air. Okay, when it goes out, he's allowed to move it. Why? Because once it goes out, it's no longer a basis. And since it wasn't burning by Ben Hashmoshes, there's no migri dis katzai le Ben Hashmoshes, it's katzai le kule yuma. Says the Mishnah Berurah, bottom line, Eis Katan Yud Zayin. V'hu adin, hakol mitam hanal. The same, it's all the same reasoning. De'ein muktzah lechatzi Shabbos sheyiyaser af acher shekava. Because there's no such thing as something that was muktzah for only part of Shabbos, remaining muktzah for the entirety of Shabbos. The only time that's true is when something was muktzah by the Ben Hashmoshes period. The case that the Mechaber gave me was somebody who lit a ner b'shoigig. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nakat b'shoigig, the only reason the Mechaber talks about somebody who lit a ner b'shoigig on Shabbos, what if he didn't light it b'shoigig? What if chas v'chalil he lit it b'mezid? Some Meshugana, Friday night, went ahead b'mezid and he lit a ner. Okay? When the ner goes out, you're allowed to move the ner. Because again, there's no you just got soil ben hashmoshes, it's got soil kula yuma. So why did the Mechaber B'dafka talk about somebody who did it b'shoigig? It says the Chavetz Chaim, I'll tell you why. The layayri b'rishiyaya, because we're not interested in talking about rishoyim. But the truth is, even if somebody chas v'chalil lit it b'mezid, it also would be mutter to move it after it goes out. Of course, only if you're moving it because the candlestick is still a kli shemalachta le'iser. Okay. Moving on to Sifav, bottom line in Tesamid Beis. Until now, we've been talking about a ner that was lit on Shabbos. Now in Sifav, says the Mechaber, ner shaloy hadliku by Shabbos. Let's say you have a candlestick and it wasn't lit on Shabbos. You have a candlestick, nobody lit it. There's no candle in it, there's no oil in it, it's just a candlestick. Nobody lit it on that Shabbos. Says the Mechaber, afilu hi shel cheres, even if it's an earthenware oil lamp, demo'us, which is something that we typically consider to be repulsive. Va'afilu shel neft, even if it's a lamp that was typically fueled using pitch. Demasriach, so it's very malodorous, it's smelly. Mutter l'taltaloi, it's mutter b'tiltal, it's not muktzah, you're allowed to move it. The muktzah mach masmius mutter, something which is a keli, and it has a Torah's kli, it is considered a keli, and you might remove yourself from it because it's mos, you find it to be repulsive. That's what it means, muktzah mach masmius. But this is something that you're allowed to move. If you want to move it, tzarech gufay, tzarech b'kaimai. Let's just cut this down very simply. If you have an oil lamp, or you have a silver candlestick, or you have a crystal candlestick, somebody will turn around and somebody will ask you a shaila, is that candlestick muktzah? Well, the answer is, we look at it when we say, well, a candlestick is a kli, it's a utensil, it's a kli shemalachtoi le'isser. It's a kli that is typically used for a function that is osir on Shabbos, right? A candlestick is to hold a burning candle. You're not allowed to light a candle on Shabbos. So you look at a candlestick in the break front, is it muktzah? Well, it's a kli shemalachtoi le'isser. It's like a hammer. A hammer you usually use to do construction. So on Shabbos, it's a kli shemalachta l'isser, and by default, it is muktzah. So to the candlestick. The candlestick is something that you usually use to light a candle and put it in. You can't do that on Shabbos. So by default, it's muktzah. But what kind of muktzah is it? It's a kli shemalachta l'isser. A kli shemalachta l'isser, you're allowed to move tzarech gufay or tzarech b'kaimai. If you want to take a hammer and you want to use it for a permissible use on Shabbos, you don't want to use it for construction. You don't want to use it to bang in nails. You want to use it to bust open a walnut. You're allowed to go downstairs to the tool chest and take out a hammer and use it to bust open a walnut. What if you have a hammer sitting on a chair in the dining room? So it's tzarech mekaimai. You need the place that it's occupying. You can take off the hammer and put it away to clear off the chair. Says the Mechaber, so too the candlestick. If it's a candlestick that was not lit on Shabbos, so we no longer have the basis l'davar aser issue. Once we clear away the basis l'davar aser issue, the only issue that's left is that it's a kli shemalachta l'isser the same way the hammer is. So then you're allowed to move it, tzarech gufay, tzarech mekaimai, the same way you're allowed to move the hammer, tzarech gufay, tzarech mekaimai. The Mechaber adds in just a little piece of information here, and he says that's even true if it's a smelly, repulsive candlestick. If it's a candlestick that was an earthenware candlestick that was fueled with oil, those are greasy and grimy and repulsive. If it's a candlestick that was fueled with neft, so it's very malodorous, so that's another reason why it's muktzah, because you remove yourself from it. You're badal minei. You don't want to have anything to do with it because it's unpleasant and it's yucky. So that's another thing that makes it muktzah. It makes it set aside. But the Mechaber is telling you, you're still allowed to move it tzarech gufay, tzarech mekaimai. Why? Because it's still a keli. It's still a kli shemalachta l'isser. The fact that it's smelly doesn't make it ois keli. It doesn't turn it into eitzim v'avonim. It doesn't turn it into sticks and stones in the backyard that are muktzah machmas gufay. They're inherently muktzah. They inherently have no use for Shabbos, so you're not allowed to move them even tzarch gufay, tzarch mekaymai. No, this repulsive oil earthenware lamp is still a kli shemalachta l'isser. It's only muktzah to the extent that you're not allowed to move it unless you're moving it tzarch gufay, tzarch mekaymai. But tzarch gufay, tzarch mekaymai, you're still allowed to move it. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Ice cotton vav. Ice cutting your test, mutal taltalai, va'aftu kli shemalachta l'isser, even though this candlestick is still a keli shemalachta l'isser, mekabakim l'tzarch gufay mekaymai mutter, you're still allowed to move it tzarch gufay, tzarch mekaymai, u'kamay shekasa siman shin ches sif gimel, like we're going to learn be'ezus Hashem yisparach when we reach siman shin ches sif gimel. Ice got chaf mutter, hoyel v'keteres kliela, because it's still a keli. The chazi l'chasuye b'mana. It still is a keli, and it's still something that theoretically could be used for a permissible usage. So, for instance, if you have a good old-fashioned earthenware oil lamp, and you have a pitcher that's open and you need to cover it, you could take that oil lamp and you could use it to cover the opening of the pitcher. It has a permissible use. If you want to move it for that purpose, that would be called moving it l'tzarech gufay, and it would be mutter. Sev Zayin. Interesting halacha. Menorah, a candelabra. This doesn't necessarily mean a Chanukah menorah, but it means a candelabra with many branches. Menorah, bein gedola bein ketana, whether it's a large candelabra or a small candelabra. Imhi shel prakim, if it's a candelabra that is put together of separate pieces. So it's shel prakim. It's made of many parts that fit together and get pushed in or screwed in or what have you. It gets assembled from many parts. Im yishal prakim, ein metaltel enoisa. It's muktzah. You're not allowed to move it. This means even if it's not lit, even if it wasn't lit on Shabbos. We just said in Sivav, if you have a nair, a candlestick, or a lamp that wasn't lit on Shabbos, so there's no basis issue. So now it becomes a kli shemalachta l'isser, and you're allowed to move it tzarch gufay, tzarch mekaymai. Now in Sif Zayin says the Mechaber, not so a menorah, a candelabra that's assembled out of many parts. No, that you're not allowed to move, even tzarch gufay, even tzarch mekaymai, even if it wasn't lit on Shabbos, so there's no basis isser. Menorah ben gedola ben ketana mishal prakim ein metaltel l'noisa. Why? Because of a different gzeras chachamim. The chayshinan, we need to be concerned. Shemet tipol, maybe when you're moving the menorah, maybe it will fall down. V'tisparek, and it will fall and come apart. V'yachzirena, when it comes apart, what are you going to do? You're going to take it and you're going to put it back together again. V'nimtza oisa keli, now you'll be over the malacha daraisa of makeh b'patish. You're assembling a keli, which you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. Now, says the Mechaber, va'afilu im eina shel prakim, the truth is, even if it's not made of many parts, ela yesh ba charitzim saviv, but it has engravings on different parts of it where it's made to look like it has seams. So really, it's all one piece. But they made lines on it to make it look like there's a seam, so it looks like it's built out of many parts. Afilu im eina shel prakim, ela sheyesh ba charitzim saviv, v'doima l'shel prakim, and therefore it looks like it's assembled of many parts. Also l'taltala, you're also not allowed to move it, because when somebody sees you moving it, he's going to think that you're moving it. He's going to think you're moving a menorah that's built of many parts, which is usher, and people are going to make a mistake, and they're going to think that you're allowed to move a menorah that is assembled of separate parts, which you're not allowed to do. Says the Mishnah Berurah cotton chaf aleph menorah. Afilu chadasha shel lo yidliku b'mei olam. This halacha that you're not allowed to move the candelabra that's assembled from different parts is true even if this menorah was never lit. What's the chiddush over there? The chiddush is there are those that hold that a menorah that was never lit, not even one time, is not even called a kli shemalachta l'isser. It's not called a kli shemalachta l'isser if it was never used for isser. Somebody will turn around and say, look, this menorah is 40 years old. It was never lit even one time. What's it for? It's a decorative piece. So he'll argue it's not a klisha malachta leser. This is not something that's used to light an air, to have a lit nair in it. No, in 40 years I never lit an air in it. Says the Mishnah Berurah over here, when the Mechaber says that you're not allowed to move the menorah that's assembled of many parts, this is a separate Gzeres Chachamim that has nothing to do with Muktzah. So even if you're going to argue that it's not a Klisha Malachta L'Isser, it's still Aser B'Tiltel. You're still not allowed to move it on Shabbos because of the Gzera that it might come apart and you might put it back together again. If you put it back together again, you will be building a Keli. This is an interesting halacha. If the way this menorah was made is that the pieces don't fit together firmly, even when you put it together, it's loose. Rafoi means it's weak, it's loose. If it doesn't go firmly back together again, then shari, then you're allowed to move it. The rationale is, if it doesn't go together firmly, then putting it together is not the malacha of Makeh B'Patish. It's only the malacha of Makeh B'Patish if you're assembling a keli that could stay. It could stay together the way it's supposed to be. But if it's something weak that just falls apart and it's very flimsy, then you're not being over Makeh B'Patish when you put it together. If there's no problem of being over Makeh B'Patish when you put it together, then there's no reason to aser moving it. Over there in Shinyon Gimel, we'll get there. Bezos Hashem Yisbarach will discuss the halacha of a kais that's made out of different parts. Gimel. The Mechaber said if you have a candelabra that has engravings on it that makes it look like it has seams and it makes it look like it's put together from many parts, that's also aser b'shum demichlaf b'shal prakim, because people will make a mistake. They'll see you moving this candelabra that has the seams, the engravings that look like seams, and they'll learn from there that it's mutter to move a candelabra that is built out of many parts. V'dad, you should know, according to what we're learning over here, also l'talta nerish shalanu, the Chavetz Chaim says this means that it is aser to move the type of neris that they commonly had in the times of the Chavetz Chaim, shekaren leichter, av shelo yadliku by be'olam, even if they were never lit, the hareihem asuyin shal prakim, because the type of leichter that they had in the time of the Chavetz Chaim were always built out of multiple pieces. So then you have to say that when it says in Siv Vav that if you have a ner that was not lit on Shabbos, you're allowed to move it. Obviously that's talking about a ner that's one piece, not a ner that was built out of many parts. Okay, moving on to Siman Reish Pei. Tashbish Hamita b'Shabbos, having marital relations on Shabbos. Ubay beis seifim, and here we have two seifim. Says the Mechaber, we know that on Shabbos there's a mitzvah of Einik Shabbos, and we've spoken at length about the mitzvah of Sudas Shabbos, and the mitzvah of how far you have to go to make sure that your Sudas Shabbos should be beautiful, and you should have delicious foods and everything else. Now, says the Mechaber, Tashbish Hamita mitanuge Shabbosu. Having marital relations is part and parcel of Einik Shabbos. That's a mitzvah of Einik Shabbos, to have marital relations on Shabbos. Lefikach, therefore, says the Mechaber, Oinas Talmidei Chachamim Haberiyim, the Oina, the appointed time, the proper time for Talmidei Chachamim to have marital relations with their wives, Habriyim, if they're healthy, is Milel Shabbos, Lelel Shabbos, from Friday night to Friday night. In other words, there's a specific mitzvah of Einik Shabbos, besides the regular mitzvah and the responsibility that a husband has to a wife of Eina, to have marital relations, but there's a specific mitzvah of Einik Shabbos that should take place on Friday night. And since there's an extra level of mitzvah to having that activity on Shabbos, therefore the Chazal said that for a healthy Talmud Chacham, where Chazal wanted to say, when is it the proper time to have marital relations, and what's the proper frequency for a healthy Talmud Chacham to have marital relations, Chazal said, Friday night to Friday night, because again, Friday night is an extra level of mitzvah. So let's set it to Friday night. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Ois kan aleph, oinas. V'yezahir lekayem oinasai. And the Chavetz Chaim goes out of his way over here, and he tells you that a person, a husband, has to be very careful to be mekayem his mitzvah and his obligation of oina, of having marital relations with his wife at the proper frequency. Mitzvah lechol shum be'erev Shabbos oy b'leil Shabbos. Chavetz Chaim brings down over here that there is a mitzvah to eat garlic on erev Shabbos or on Friday night. V'hu adin shar dvarim hamarbim zera. So too other foods that are known to increase a person's zera, a person's seed. Ayin Siman Tafresh Ches Sif Dalet. Now it's very interesting. I think I forgot to bring. Yeah, I don't have my Dirshu Mishnah Berurah over here where I'm saying share, but if you take a look in the Dirshu footnotes, it sounds over here, mitzvah lechol shum be'erev Shabbos oy b'leil Shabbos. It's a mitzvah. Okay, so the Mechaber is saying that there's a specific mitzvah of Tashrish Hamita Friday night. Garlic is something which is known to be marbe zera, and perhaps to be marbe taiva, to be marbe the desire for marital relations as well, and therefore it makes sense that there should be a mitzvah to eat garlic. Okay, first of all, what level of a mitzvah is this to eat garlic? Second of all, is it like a mitzvah, like the other mitzvahs that we have to eat different things? Is there a minimum shear? So I think the first position people would guess is, that means, I don't know, you have some garlic confit, you have some garlic dip over there, you become the mitzvah of eating garlic on Friday night. How about somebody who's not going to have marital relations? How about a bacher? How about an unmarried individual? How about an elderly person? Is it a mitzvah for him to eat garlic? It sounds like the tam doesn't apply. But if you look at the Dirshu footnotes, there are those actually that say that no, there's a mitzvah, and the mitzvah applies to everyone. It's brought down over there. I'm trying to remember from who. Maybe it was from Chaim Kanievsky? Take a look at the Dirshu footnotes. That even a person that this is not negeah to, should eat garlic on Friday night, because Chazal said that it's a mitzvah to eat garlic on Friday night. The reason that's given over here is one facet of the reasoning of that mitzvah. But like everything else in the Torah, this could be very, very multi-layered. We don't know what other inyanim are involved in eating garlic on Friday night. And therefore, I'm pretty sure it was Reb Chaim Kanievsky, they bring down from the Chazon Ish and from the Stipler Goyen, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, that they had everybody eat garlic on Friday night. Even Bachrim ate garlic on Friday night. And there are those that say that you should eat at least a kazayas of garlic in order to be bekayim this mitzvah. Very, very interesting. Ayin Sham in the Dirshu footnotes for some more information. Kasa b'Sefer Chasidim Siman Shin Tzadik. It's actually written in the Sefer Chasidim Siman Shin Tzadik, the Shumim Mevatlim Taiva, that garlic has the opposite effect, that it lessens a person's desire for marital relations. Rak Shumim Tzluyim Marbim Zera. The garlic has to be roasted. Now, roasted over here does not mean dry roasted. It means like some delicious roasted garlic that they make nowadays. You take some good extra virgin olive oil, you pour it over the garlic, you put it into the oven for 45 minutes or an hour. Ooh, it's delicious. That's what it means, roasted garlic. And that's the garlic that we're speaking about over here, that it's a mitzvah to eat shum because it's mar bezera and mar betaiva. Oid kasaf. It's also brought down, called var meluchim, very salty foods, mema'atim. They lessen the zera and they lessen the taiva. V'chein kitniyas, so too beans. V'adashim uvushalim, cooked lentils, kishe'ein meluchim, if they're not salted. Marbim, those have a positive effect like garlic. Ois cotton bays, habriim. This is talking about healthy individuals. La'afuke chalushe kayach, but a weak individual, einam chayavim rak lefi koychon. When we say that a Talmid Chacham has a mitzvah of oina Friday night to Friday night, that's assuming that he's healthy and he's a person with the necessary kayach. But if it's a weak individual, then we can't be mechayev him necessarily for oina every Friday night. Ois cotton gimel milal Shabbos, hainu levad leil tefila, The Chavetz Chaim is reminding us over here that when we say that the oina of a Talmid Chacham, the time that a Talmid Chacham has a chiyuv to have relations with his wife is Friday night, he's reminding us that there's another night that there's a mitzvah of, and that is the Leil Tefillah, the night that she goes to the mikveh. V'tzarech lizar, and a person has to take care. Shekaydim sheyagia alayla, before the night rolls around, chayiv lahar ois chiba yisera v'ava im ishtoi. A man has to take great care to be very loving towards his wife and to show her tremendous affection. In other words, this is not, mitzvah, let's go, Friday night, there's mitzvah, oinas Talmid Chacham habriim, Friday night, tashmish, no. This is something a person has to show the necessary affection and the necessary love and the necessary proper treatment to his wife beforehand, in advance, before Friday night rolls around. Vein tzarich loymar, and it goes without saying, shelo yargel shum kitata be'erev Shabbos, that there should be no strife, machloikis, any kind of negative interactions between husband and wife on Erev Shabbos. Moving along to Sif Beis, says the Mechaber, Mutter livoil lechatchila besula b'Shabbos. A man is allowed to have relations with a besula on Shabbos. So if a fellow got married on Erev Shabbos, which back in the day was a thing, that they made a chasana on Erev Shabbos, and the chasana Suda was the Friday night Suda. So now they're going to be together the first time on Friday night. If she's a besula, you would think that there might be an argument to make that it should be usher to have those marital relations, because when he lives with a basula for the first time, it's going to cause her to bleed. You would think that that's considered a wound, and that would be called being chayvel, causing a wound, which is usher on Shabbos. Therefore, says the Mechaber, mutter liva lechatchila basula b'Shabbos. It is permissible to have relations for the first time with a basula on Shabbos. Ve'ein by mishum chayvel, and there's no iser here of chayvel. Ve'loy mishum tzarla. It's also not a problem of causing her tzar, which would be inappropriate on Shabbos because it could be painful. Explains the Mishnah Berurah Katan Daled mishum chayvel. There's no problem here of making a wound. Why not? You're causing bleeding. Explains the Mishnah Berurah, the dam mifkad pocket, because we paskin that the dam that comes forth when the basulim are broken, it's not pshat that you caused a wound and you caused bleeding. When somebody chas v'chalila cuts himself, right? So you cut and you release the blood that is absorbed in the tissues and in the minor blood vessels that are in the flesh. When this stands in contrast to the dam basulim, which we say is mifkad pocket. We look at it as a collection of blood that is surrounded by tissue. It's built up. It's not absorbed within the tissue. It's a deposit that's collected in one place, and you're making an opening which allows it to come out. That's not making a wound. And the Mishnah Berurah explains this. The Mishnah Berurah says, Dahainu, Shadam Besulim Eina Muvla Bekosle Beis Harechem. We don't look at the Dam Besulim as being absorbed within the walls and within the tissue of the womb. Elakonus Husham is just collected over there. Kemufkad umutzna b'soicha keli. It's like a deposit of blood, let's say, that's held within a pitcher. So if you have liquid inside a pitcher, it's not absorbed in the pitcher. It's a collection that's collected in the bottle. It's not absorbed in the bottle. You're not going to pick up a bottle and say, wow, there's a lot of soda absorbed in that bottle. It's not absorbed. It's contained. That's the word I was looking for. It's contained. Chazal say that the dam besulim is contained within the rechem. And when you break the besulim, you allow that dam to flow out. But it's not absorbed so that you need to make a wound in order to get it out. You're just making an opening so that the collected blood could flow out. Continues the Mishnah Berurah, he says, having said this, there are those that say that in certain locales where they had the minig to be machmir and to say you're not allowed to live with a basula for the first time on Friday night, there are those that say that you shouldn't be makel for them. But the Taz writes, Chalila lasois iser bazeh, Chalila to make such an iser. It's not true. Ubeberer, and by way of explanation of this Taz, Shamati, I heard, Shachasidim Ga'oinei Ha'olam Nagu Ba'atzvam Heter Bazeh. Chasidim Ga'oinei Ha'olam, the greatest of the greats, were Noyeg Heter, to live with a Basula on Friday night. Alkein Ein Chash Chumra Bazeh Klal, and therefore there's no room here to be Machmir. V'hamachmir Einoi Ela Min HaMasmin, and somebody who's Machmir is doing something that's a Pella. It's doing something that's a wonder. It doesn't make any sense. Here he brings down an ancillary halacha neged to getting married on Erev Shabbos or Friday night. He says you should take a look later in Siman Shin Lamed Tesef Kat Yud Aleph B'Magen Avram. The lechatchila roy liyachad on achar achuppah yichad gomer kaidem haShabbos. Somebody's getting married on Erev Shabbos. You should make sure to make yichud. Right? To put the chassan and kala alone in a room, you should make sure to make yichud before Shabbos. The yesharimim the chuppah shalanu loy mikri chuppah. Let's remember, halachic marriage happens in two stages. Kiddushin. Kiddushin is you give the kala the ring. Hariyat v'kudeshes libetabasu kedas Moshe v'Yisrael. You have now made kiddushin. She's now usher to anybody else. She's only mutter to the husband. But the marriage is not yet complete, because you made Kedushin, but you did not yet make Nisuin. How do we make Kedushin and Nisuin nowadays? So one of the ways that you make Nisuin is Chuppah. Now, we all know what a Chuppah is. We do the Kedushin under the Chuppah. We have the Chuppah, in English, the marriage canopy, and the Chassid gives the Kala the ring, and says, Harayat M'Kadesh L'Sli B'Tabasu Kedas Moshe V'Yisrael, under the Chuppah. And there are those Shittas that say that Chuppah makes Nisuin. How does that chuppah make nisuin? Because the chuppah, the canopy, underneath that canopy is called the domain, the reshus of the chassan. The truth is, we go nowadays to a hall to get married. The guy, the hall manager, the Jewish fellow who's in charge of running the wedding, will come over to the chassan and tell him to make a kinyan that he should acquire the area under the chuppah. That way he's bringing the kala under the chuppah. And that affects chuppah and it affects nisuin. But there are those that say that chuppah does not make nisuin. So how do we make nisuin? By the next step. We know that after the breaking the glass and the Mazel Tov and the Od Yishama Bar Yehuda, they take the chassan and the kala into a yichud room. They go into a room alone and they lock the door. Now he took her into his private domain. That's chuppah. What the Mishnah Berurah is bringing down over here is, if somebody gets married on Erev Shabbos, he should make sure to make yichud before Shabbos. Don't just rely on the chuppah, because there are those that hold that the chuppah doesn't make nisuin. So what? What's the problem? Oh, the Mishnah Berurah says, Vim Kain, if the chuppah doesn't make nisuin, and you don't make yichud until after Shabbos starts, now you have a problem. What's the problem? In Kain Kishen is yachid u'achkach b'Shabbos, then when the chassid takes the kala home Friday night, now he is acquiring the kala on Shabbos. And you're not allowed to make an acquisition on Shabbos. So in a nutshell, what the Mishnah Berurah is saying is, make sure you acquire the wife before Shabbos starts. Acquiring the wife completely means nisuin. We have a question whether or not our chuppah really makes nisuin. So don't make the chuppah before Shabbos starts and then make the yichud after Shabbos starts, because then the yichud would be the nisuin and it would be making an acquisition on Shabbos. Instead, make sure to make the yichud on Erev Shabbos so that you're definitely making the acquisition on Shabbos. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTOrah. The schus of limud HaTOrah should be made against Klal Yisrael. The Baruch Shem should send Yeshua's refuahs parnassot shedukrim to all those in need. We should be zeicher to see the Bias Gal Tzedek. B'meher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.